Luka Bloom, welcome to Australian Musician.
Very happy to be here. Lovely to talk to you.
So it's been a difficult year for everyone. What's the coronavirus situation where you are, and how have you been coping? How are you?
I'm really good, thank you. I have no complaints. I where I live, it's what I call luxury lockdown, only because I live just outside a village that has a population of 68 people. So, social distancing is the norm. It's and I live in a lovely part of the west of Ireland. So, I've the way I describe it is when I was about 14 years old, I spent my days out and about on my bicycle cycling around the plains of Kildare where I lived. And then all evening I'd be playing my guitar. And at 65, I've reverted to about 14. I'm kind of living the life I lived when I was a 14-year-old. I'm doing okay, you know. In the beginning, it was a challenge to see your calendar suddenly turn white and to lose all the tours I was going to do this year in Holland and Belgium and in America. They all fell by the wayside. But at a certain point, I realized that I was one of the lucky ones, you know. And also, I realized at the end of April that the world sort of owes me nothing. I'm 65 years old. I've toured Australia 14 times.
Yeah.
I've toured America 25 times. The world owes me nothing, and so anything that comes my way in life now is a bonus. And the important thing for me to do is to stay safe from infection myself and to make sure I don't infect anybody else. So that's my priority now. I'm just doing what I'm told, which is unusual for me, but I'm doing my best with it.
Last time I spoke to you was 10 years ago, uh,
Wow.
and you were rebuilding your songwriting room because it wasn't working for you. It seems to be working well now. How much difference can a change of environment make to your creativity?
Absolutely enormous. And I'm not even sure that it should, but in my case, it does. Um, and I think that's got something to do with the way that I write. I don't write songs on the road. I'm not one of these guys that sits in a dressing room or a hotel room after a gig and writes songs. When I'm on tour, I'm really on tour. I'm only interested in the people I'm singing for and the people I'm traveling with. And it's the social side, I suppose, of this working life. And I think if I want to try and honor the process of writing, I think I just need a bit of solitude and quiet. And I made a decision. I used to live in and close to Dublin for years, and about 9 years ago, I decided to move to the west of Ireland, where I now live, and it's completely transformed my songwriting. I think I've become a better songwriter as a result of it, actually, because I'm living now in an environment that's full of music, and there are amazing musicians living around here, and you just feel like part of a musical family living around here. And I think it's really affected the way that I approach my songs.
Are you the kind of songwriter who has an archive of spare parts of songs lying around?
Oh yeah, yeah. I have notebooks that I rarely open, and I'm afraid to open them because I suspect that I'm going to be horrified at what I'm going to see from page to page, that I would devote so much time to writing such drivel. But I accept the fact that I have to go through these processes to eventually arrive at one diamond that might get me started. And that's invariably what happens. Because I go through long periods of not writing, and I do that deliberately, because one of my fears of an album is that I dread the idea of making the same album twice. And I think when you're a solo singer person, especially, it's very easy to just keep repeating yourself. And I like to say to people that my concept of hell is a comfort zone. So there needs to be a period of time when I'm not writing at all, and that means that when I come back to the well, and go into the process of writing again, the first thing that happens is that I just feel awful and I feel like a complete idiot who has nothing to say for himself, and why would anybody be remotely interested in listening to anything else you'd ever write. And but somehow you keep going, you accept this process of, you see, because if I go a year or two without writing, I'm not writing, but I'm living, so life is moving on and things are happening and things are changing, and I want, in a way, whatever I write to reflect that. And so when I come back, technically you're out of, it's like an athlete coming back from an injury and trying to get fit again. In the beginning you feel like, how will I ever win a race? How am I ever going to get picked for the team? Um, and you just keep going and you work through that pain. And eventually, I can remember the song that I wrote on Bittersweet Crimson. I remember I wrote a song called Can We Stay, which is the first song. And I remember that was about maybe the 10th or 15th song I'd written in this process. But it was the first one that I went, okay, now I can begin. Now I'm at the foot of the mountain and I can climb.
Yeah. Uh, the new album is called Bittersweet Crimson. I believe when you went into the studio, these songs weren't fully formed. The arrangement.
No,
Can you talk
no,
through that process of getting to the end?
it was a conscious decision because I decided there were particular people I wanted to play with, and I had a feeling for the nature of the record I wanted to make. I wanted it to be very organic. I didn't want the songs to be arranged in any formal way. I wanted them to be unfinished going to the studio, and yet we were only going to be there for 2 days. Um, and so we were running the risk of the album of this, and we were playing live, and we'd only had one rehearsal to get a feeling for the structures of the songs. I wanted the songs to be even open-ended in their completion. By that I mean there are a couple of songs that have quite long introductions, musical introductions, and there are a couple of songs. There's the very last song. I think the outro lasts about 3 minutes, and that was all deliberate because I wanted us to just enjoy the process of discovery of each other and of the songs, and for that all to be recorded as a document. And I didn't really, I wasn't convinced that that was how the record was going to end up, because it's a scary thing to do. It's a scary commitment to make, both for me and for the other musicians. But I was kind of almost overwhelmed by the result. It felt so good.
Yeah. The lyrics and titles on this album, things like falling oaks, friendly oaks, olive trees, pomegranate trees. What what was the fascination with trees with this album?
Well, there are two references to oak trees. One is my old friend the oak tree, which is inspired by an 800-year-old oak tree in the domain of a castle in a place called Birr in the centre of Ireland. The castle is 400 years old. The oak tree is 800 years old, and it's a tree I visit every season. I make no apologies for being a tree hugger. Um, and I love going to this magical place in the centre of Ireland and just leaning into the mossy bark of that tree. The second song referencing an oak tree is the oak tree is a metaphor for the great Irish poet that was Seamus Heaney, who died in 2013. And there was a feeling of a great chieftain passing away when he died. It's his anniversary this week, actually. And I used the oak tree, the falling of an oak tree, as a metaphor for this great man's passing.
But were there other songs that you had available that didn't make the cut for this album?
Oh, probably about 8 or 10, yeah, at least, yeah. I mean, yeah. But the narrowing down process came very naturally. The narrowing down process came as a result of one rehearsal with the people I played with. It was clear there were one or two songs that weren't necessarily bad songs, but they either had something that was a little similar, too similar to one or two of the other songs, or they just weren't working as a collective unit. I mean, this happens to me a lot. I also have boxes somewhere of songs that didn't make the cut onto a record. I should really look into that someday. There probably are a couple of good ones out there. But if a song, I'm pretty brutal when it comes to this process. That once I've arrived at the 10 or 11 or 12 songs that are, I still believe in the album. The album is what does it for me, and It's how I like to experience other people's music. It's how I've always bought into and bought the album of the artist that I'm curious about. So when I'm going to work myself with regard to writing songs, the big picture is always the album.
I guess the track order is important to you as well.
Hugely important, but I don't do it. It's not my job. The man who engineers almost all my albums is the legend that is Brian Masterson. He's worked on most of my albums for 40 years. He mixes and masters. He's one of the people who created the famous Windmill Lane. He's recorded with everybody, and he's one of my favorite human beings on earth. And invariably, he creates the final running order.
And Bittersweet Crimson, why is that the title track?
About a year ago, 2019, I did a concert for a beautiful little organisation called Irish Seed Savers, and their mission in life is to preserve the integrity and the biodiversity of Irish fruit and vegetables. And I did a little gig for them, and at the end of the gig, a woman came to me and said, "You know, what brings people together in life is music and food." And it stayed with me. And over the next few days, I decided I must select a form of food and write a song about it. And the potato has been covered by us Irish people, and I decided to explore the humble pomegranate, which hails in the northern hemisphere. It hails from places like Afghanistan and India, Iran, and two countries that have known, like Ireland, a lot of trouble over the years. And here at the heart of their culture is this beautiful fruit, which is to them the fruit of fertility, love, and friendship. And I decided to try and write a song about the pomegranate and use it as a metaphor for friendship between people and cultures. And I also came across this phrase describing the pomegranate and decided it would make a beautiful title for the album. And I asked my dear friend Lorcan Walsh, the great Irish painter, to paint me a pomegranate.
Okay. Um, how do you know when a song is finished?
What a what a wonderful question. I don't think anybody's ever asked me that before. How do you know when a song is finished? You know, you know when certain songs are finished. Um, some songs need to be crafted in a way that it can take time for a song to have that rounded feeling of being over. And then there's a song like Vision for 2020 that just drifts off. It just drifts off into space at the end, and it's almost deliberately left unfinished. And one of the things I like about this album is there are a couple of songs that have a slightly unfinished feeling about them, and they drift in and they drift out. And we've only gotten to play together live once when we launched the album 2 weeks ago, and we left the songs like that. We left some of the songs um, unfinished. But springing to my mind are two songs. One is called Gone to Pablo, which is a song on Riverside from 1990. And the other is a song called City of Chicago from about 1984. And I can actually remember the moment I had the feeling. And both songs were written within a half an hour. And I can remember this feeling of, wow, that's done. And they're both short songs. But I remember thinking, no, no, no more verses. It's just, it's like taking a photograph. It doesn't happen with every song. Some songs are like writing a bloody novel, and some songs are like taking a photograph. It's a really interesting question I've never thought about before. The only way I can describe what it is to complete a song is that there is a feeling of, there just is a feeling where you just say, it's done. And then there are other songs where you go, this song isn't complete, but maybe it never will be, and maybe it never should be.
Yeah. You've been doing online concerts during the year. Uh,
Two.
yeah, there was one that must be the first one. You mentioned on social media that you were quite emotional about it because it was so rare. Could you expand on that?
Well, that was, I mean, lockdown happened in Ireland on, I think, March 20th. It would have begun on March 22, which I think was a Monday. But so the close of business, March 20th on the Saturday, was the beginning of lockdown in Ireland. And my friendly health food store, the Aloe Tree in the town of Ennistimon, I went to them and I said, "Look, you're locking down. Would you be okay at the end of business today if I came in with a couple of cameras?" And we didn't stream it live because I didn't trust the broadband, and this was very, very new then for all of us. And we just came in with a couple of microphones and a couple of cameras, and I did it like I think I did about just an hour and 10 minutes. And but I remember feeling quite emotional during it. I remember the oddness of there being no audience and knowing that inside the camera, that's where the audience was going. I mean, I've done TV programs and stuff, so I know how this works, where you're in a room with just camera people. But this was different. And I think I had a feeling during that gig that it was going to be a long, long time before I could do gigs again. Interestingly, that gig, Luka Bloom live at the Aloe Tree, has become the biggest gig I've ever done in my life.
Right.
It's been viewed by over 200,000 people, and it was one of the first lockdown gigs that had happened, I think. Um, but that was the moment I got the feeling that, wow, all my tours will be gone, and I don't know when I'll get to Australia again to sing. And anybody who knows me since 1992 knows what Australia means to me and what going there means to me. And but I've had to let that go and surrender to it and make my peace with it. As I said to you earlier, the world owes me nothing. I've been to Australia 14 times, and 2 years of my life I've spent in Australia in increments of 7 weeks at a time. Uh, I've great kinship with your country, and I really hope I get back, but I have to accept this uncertainty.
Yeah. You actually dedicated a song to the Australian firefighters on this album.
Yeah. Yeah, well, my last tour in Australia was in 2019 in April, and it was my favourite tour I ever did in Australia. And one of the reasons it was my favourite tour is because normally when I'd go to Melbourne, I'd do one gig in the National in St Kilda. But for the 2019 tour, I actually said to Adrian Bohm, "Can we please do more gigs in Melbourne? Because I just want to hang out and say hello to some people and go to different places." So I think we did 5 gigs. We did the Memo Club, the Caravan Club. We went out to Menian for a night, and one other venue. I'm sorry, I can't remember. We did 5 gigs, and that's just one example of a beautiful, beautiful trip. But one of the drives was from Katoomba in the Blue Mountains down to Canberra, and we came down through Sydney, and we went down to a place called Milton, and stayed in a little seaside place called Mollymook, and into Ulladulla, and down to Bateman's Bay, and we turned right in Bateman's Bay up through Braidwood into Canberra. And on New Year's Eve at the end of 2019, I was watching towns burning. And I'd just been there a few months earlier, and it just broke my heart. I mean, watching the population of Eden in New South Wales on the beach looking at their town burning, it just absolutely broke my heart. I really was really emotional about it. And that's where I created this song, "Who Will Heal the Land?" Because, and yeah, I did dedicate it to the firefighters because I think one of the reasons I'm so attracted to Australia, I mean, don't get me wrong, I know Australia is not perfect. Nowhere is perfect. Ireland's not perfect. Nowhere is. We all have our issues and our mountains to climb. But there's a thing about Australia that's always touched me. One is the black sense of humour. I really relate to the black humour in Australia. But the other thing is there is a sense of decency that when people are struggling, they come together and help each other out. And I think that's really exemplified in the firefighting community. Um, I'm not going to pretend to know more than I do, but it's really impressive to me the way people come together and help each other out. And I just wanted to honour that and sing to that.
Yeah. Um, a lot of stories have come out of your guitars. Are there any romantic stories about the guitars?
Well, can I show you my favourite guitar I've ever had? So, this is a George Loudon guitar. I'm 65 years old now, and when I turned 60, the thought crossed my mind I might get a grown up guitar. Because touring a lot, I've kind of made a virtue out of trying to bang a good sound out of cheap guitars. And when I turned 60, I decided I wanted a guitar that would do more work for me than I would have to do. So I went to the legend that is George Loudon in the north of Ireland, who is my favourite guitar maker, and had the most amazing conversation I ever had with anyone about guitars. He asked me to tell him everything I loved and hated about guitars, and I told him. And he challenged me, and he made me a steel string guitar that's right behind me, and I absolutely love it. But then I went to him and I said, I really want um, a really beautiful, resonating Spanish classical type guitar. And he made me this instrument. And the album before this one was an album called Refuge, and it's just that guitar. And Bittersweet Crimson, that's the only guitar I play. And every single time I pick it up, I want to write a song. It literally sings. It literally has this voice that's older and sweeter and deeper than my voice ever could be. It's the most inspiring instrument I've ever had, and even with this album, I had a kind of a confidence in myself to just pull my playing right back, because I chose these beautiful musicians. The amazing Steve Cooney from Australia, who's living in Ireland all these years, who's changed Irish music, I believe, in a very positive way. Robbie Harris on percussion, John O'Connell on double bass, the beautiful Nia Farrell, who's an amazing singer I only discovered in March this year, and then Adam Shapiro, a man who lives here beside me, a fiddle player. And I decided with these songs that I would step back. Normally I'm front and center with my guitars in the sound, but with this guitar and these songs, I went, no, 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 no. Come right back, just sit back. And my job with this album was to just create a landscape for the others to shine. And this guitar gave me the confidence to do that. My whole life is about guitars. I mean, at 14 years old, I was cycling around where I'm from in County Kildare during the day, and at night time playing guitar. And now I'm 65 and I'm 14 years old again. I'm just cycling around all day and playing my guitar at night. And but that guitar I just showed you there is the sweetest instrument I've ever had.
Yeah. So, what are your revised plans for 2020?
Well, I mean, the first big decision I made was when I let go of the gigs. The big decision I made was to proceed with the album. So I'm an independent singer-songwriter since 1999. I haven't had a record deal since 1998. Um, so it was a really big and kind of brave decision to proceed with this album in lockdown. But I felt the songs needed to be heard for me. And it felt like a beautiful recording, and I could feel a connection between this album and this time. And I made a conscious decision. I can't believe I'm going to say this. I made a conscious decision to become a CEO of my album and to just back off the need to write songs for a while and try and understand what it might mean to send an album into the world at a time when I can't do any gigs. and it's been a really interesting experience, and that's occupied my working life since about March, and now it's out there, and I'm really proud of it. I'm really happy that we succeeded in getting it across the line. I've had incredible help from some really great people, including Gaynor Crawford, who is responsible for me doing this interview in Australia. She's getting me really great work around Australia, just talking to people, because I can't go to Australia and sing for you. So this is the only way I can communicate through wonderful people like you. And this has been my preoccupation, is to just honor this album, because one of the things I'm prone to is getting an album across the line and then abandoning it and just letting it go on its merry way. And I decided not to do that with this record and stay with it for a while and allow it find its wings and allow it to connect with people. Apart from that, 2020 for me is about being patient and being quiet and looking back over my life and recognizing things I've done wrong and recognizing things I could do better, not just in music but in every aspect of my life. And I think that's happening to a lot of people. I think what I like to say about this time is that we're all vulnerable now, and people are living with different levels of lockdown. Everybody's life has been changed. Everybody's perception of their trajectory and their future is utterly altered. And the only certainty we have at this moment is uncertainty. And maybe as a musician, as a singer, I'm at an advantage because I've lived with uncertainty my whole life, and I've lived with vulnerability my whole life. And 2020 for me is about reflecting on that and growing through it and giving the world a break. You know, the winner in all of this is nature. That's the winner. The water is cleaner. The trees are growing taller. The animals are out playing in the fields. And the word I like for this year is anthropaused. And anthropause is seemingly a word that describes the wilding of the rewilding of the earth when the humans go quiet. And the humans have been forced to be quiet for a while, and nature's having a ball.
And that's got to be a good thing.
Yeah. We
Well,
just have to adapt, you know. We have to adapt, and this is not going away. People who are craving normality, I feel, may be missing the point, because I think that normality will be a fine-tuned version of this. It'll be a variation of this for a long, long time, I think, and I just hope they figure out a way to get me back to Australia so that I can come and sing in Melbourne again.
yeah. Well, we look forward to that as soon as it can happen. And Luka Bloom, it's been a pleasure talking to you, and thanks for joining us.
I've really enjoyed the conversation, and I really wish you well, and everybody there, send you all my best wishes, and I hope to God I get to see you soon.